Pennsylvania, you could do that at 18. So got into that business a little bit and um, continued to bartend while I went to school at Lehigh University. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with Lehigh, but it's in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, big engineering school, and started work as an undergrad in industrial engineering there, and then was moonlighting at night, doing various different jobs, bartending. And really what shaped, I would say, most of my life and my career sort of happened in my senior year and then the year following, which was 2002, 2003 into 2004. And what I mean by that was um, we had a lot going on. My father was really sick with terminal cancer at the time. I was finishing my industrial engineering education at Lehigh. I had done well enough in that pursuit that I was granted a free year of education at Lehigh following my graduation. And I was definitely not, even though I loved math and science, was not a behind the desk type spreadsheet guy. I knew I wanted to be in something that would be a little bit more people forward and allow me to interact with just people more than like sitting in a cube would be. And that was more the traditional engineering route and something that I wasn't super interested in at the time. So I started into a double major in marketing. And at the same time, my father passed away. So that fall, I actually withdrew from that fifth year temporarily and was having a little bit of an identity crisis. He was a podiatric surgeon and had been a medic in the military, and decided that I might want to get into medicine, specifically in the family practice side, just to be more community oriented, be able to talk with somebody different every day, every minute of every day. And went back to school. And because I had such a heavy engineering background with math and science, it wasn't a whole lot of a lift to finish a pre-med degree. So I did that in that fifth year. And at the same time, I met who is now my wife, Kristen. And I was also running a new Irish pub and restaurant in Bethlehem. And what was unique about that place was it had almost 50 different draft lines. And I'm not going to focus too much on beer because you guys are younger and it's not exactly the most appropriate thing, but it is a big part of what I do for a living. So at that time, 50 draft lines, 50 craft beers was a big deal. It was kind of unheard of, even in California, which you guys are way ahead of the game out there in terms of breweries. I'm sure just by virtue of being young people who are observant, you notice that there's a lot of that type of activity in California, certainly more so than there was on the East Coast. And that's really where my love of craft beer came from. And also just love the environment that I was in. I was running that location while I was completing my schooling. I got accepted into medical school and just decided it. My poor wife, she thought she was marrying a future doctor, decided that I wasn't going to go to medical school and I wanted to try to open my own restaurant somewhere. So she was completing her master's in higher education at the time. And we started looking at college towns all up and down the East Coast. I mean, college towns are pretty much recession proof, especially if they have really good universities in them, and they're great places to be. They're good places for food and beverage. She wanted to work at a higher education institution. And we were fortunate enough to find a location that was for sale here in Charlottesville. And this is where the University of Virginia is, for those of you that might not know that. I was in New York City with a buddy from Lehigh who also had his mechanical engineering degree and master's in math. He was teaching at the time, and I convinced him to quit his job and move to Charlottesville with me and open a restaurant. So we moved down to Charlottesville in 2006 and basically did all the work ourselves. We completely gutted a restaurant, redid it, redesigned the menu, put all the pieces in place, and we were able to open a successful restaurant in town. It was also an Irish pub of the same name as the one that I ran in Bethlehem, only because the one that I ran in Bethlehem was called JP McGrady's, and the street that this place happened to be on was Grady Avenue. So it was too perfect to name it anything else. So we named it McGrady's. And we opened that restaurant here in Charlottesville and was successful. My business partner at the time and I still have a great relationship. He's in Charleston now, but he met his wife here. And my wife started working for the University of Virginia. And, ran that successfully for a couple of years, bought him out because his wife finished her doctorate and they ultimately moved on. She's now a professor in College of Charleston. And throughout that process, I was able to meet a whole bunch of great people here in town, not the least of which was my business partner who had moved to the area maybe in 2011. He was an entrepreneur before that as well. And we were both interested in doing something that was bigger than what we were currently doing. The restaurant was doing well, but unless you're going to franchise in the restaurant world, there's not a whole lot of growth. You got to open a lot of different restaurants, or you got to be willing to franchise it and try to take it outside. And the model I had, I didn't think was going to work well like that. And I was also getting a little bit older. We had started a family. Being the guy that's, in an Irish pub until 3, 4 in the morning wasn't super conducive to becoming somebody in their late 20s and early 30s. The energy level starts to go down a little bit, and it was just not something that I was super interested in doing for the rest of my life. And I bonded with George, who's my business partner now, and we're both Eagles fans because we're both from Eastern Pennsylvania. And we started talking about what the options would be, specifically in beverage. And in Virginia at the time, the only way that you could serve a beer to somebody if you were a manufacturer, if you were a brewery producer, was if you had a restaurant. And that made it very difficult to open breweries, because when you start a brewery, it's a lot of capital up front. You've got to invest in a lot of stainless steel, all the vessels to make the beer, all the kegs to put it into, packaging lines if you're going to put a product into cans. This is no different than any other beverage that there is out there in the market. And on top of that, you would also have to essentially run a restaurant. So you'd have to outfit a kitchen, get a full staff. It's just a very expensive, risky proposition up front. But what happened in 2012 here in the state of Virginia is they changed the law. California has had this forever. Most of the West Coast has, Oregon, Colorado, you name it, all the biggest craft states in the country. You're allowed to open a brewery and just have a tasting room and have people come in. And if they're interested in beer, and of course they're of legal age, they can buy a product from you. And the difference there is margin. So when we look at it from a business perspective, if I'm selling that same product to a distributor that then sells it to a restaurant, I may make $130 on a keg. But if I sell each of those beers in that keg directly to a consumer for $7, $8, $9, $10 a pour, I'm making somewhere between $700 and $1,000 on the same keg, right? So dramatic difference in the revenue that you can make and the margin you can make to the bottom line. So from a business case perspective, being able to sell that beer to a consumer without having to invest in a restaurant really exploded the industry here in Virginia. We opened in 2013. That law was passed in 2012. And to give you guys an idea, our first brewery was number 23 in the state of Virginia. That's kind of a joke in California. There's like 1,000 of them out there. And today, our most recent one that we opened was actually number 515. So in 10 years, that was the growth that our state experienced in our particular section of the industry. Over 500 new manufacturers entered into it, all because of that, really because of that one law that changed. So how we've built our business, very different from anybody else. And I'll try not to focus too much on the beer, but just on the business side. When we opened, the other thing that's interesting about the state of Virginia is it's a 3-tier system, which means that you can only own and operate one portion of any of the tiers. The tiers are manufacturing. So think brewery, think winery, think whatever. That's manufacturing. Then there's wholesale, which is the distributor. And then there's retail, which would be your restaurants and your grocery stores. You cannot own a grocery store and also own a brewery. They don't want you to vertically integrate your businesses that way. But what we were able to do is own one in tier 1 and in tier 2. And we did tier 2 because our wives started their own distribution company. So very quickly out of the gate, we were in control of everything from grain purchasing, quite literally the raw materials from the earth, from the farm, all the way through the process of when it was poured out, in the market at somebody's restaurant. That allowed us to make sure we had the freshest product possible. We were our own sales reps. We had our own people on the street. We were able to keep all the margin that the wholesaler would normally take, and we were able to organically grow our business pretty quickly. That was hyper unique in the state of Virginia. Nobody had really done that before. The other thing that's interesting about that is when you sign with a distributor, you sign with them for life in the state of Virginia. It's a one-way marriage. When you say you are going to have my brand, you get to sell my product, they get to own you forever. And the only way out of it is a very expensive legal battle, or for them to actually decide that they don't want you anymore and sell it or drop your business. So you're creating a lot of value when you're selling products through the wholesale channel, because that is revenue streams for that wholesaler for life, into perpetuity. The reason that started, I'll give you guys a quick background on the beer industry. Go back to Prohibition. When we exited Prohibition in the United States, there were only a handful of breweries that emerged. They were the big ones: Budweiser, Miller Lite, Miller Coors, those big guys. But there were thousands of mom and pop distributors that were popping up. So if Susan and Joe's distribution shop in Charlottesville, Virginia wanted to sign on with Anheuser-Busch and take their product, and then Anheuser-Busch wanted to say, no, we no longer like you, it was going to destroy the small mom and pop Susan and whatever male name I just used as my, for instance, I forget, their distribution shop, right? Because they would have spent all the money to go out and advertise for this big brewery, and the brewery says, nope, can't have my business anymore. They're done. So they wrote this law into effect, which essentially protected the distributors. But what's happened over the last, decades, but really in the last 2 decades, as the industry has changed and evolved and so many more have come to light, there's now thousands and thousands and thousands of producers, of manufacturers, and the distribution shops have consolidated. So now all the power lies within the distribution houses. So for instance, in the state of Virginia, there's about 4 left. So 4 distribution shops control everything that's sold in our entire state. And we have a pretty big state. We have a lot of populated areas with Richmond, Virginia Beach, Northern Virginia, of course, Alexandria, Arlington. So 4 shops essentially control the livelihood and the businesses of all of those manufacturers across the state of Virginia, which is kind of wild to think about. But we didn't want to get into that business right away and sign our business away. So we started, like I said, our own distribution shop. And we ran that concurrently with our business for a number of years. We also did something that was unique in our state, and that we started opening additional locations. We went outside of our home market, which was Charlottesville here in Central Virginia, and we opened the next market in Harrisonburg. Harrisonburg is where James Madison University is, JMU. If any of you guys are football fans, you'll know that they are in their first year in Division I, but that's a big university in the state as well. And we opened a satellite location there. We did that brick and mortar location for somebody to walk into a 3-notch location and meet our people, understand what our culture's like, explore all of the different research and development R&D projects that we have going on, trying new flavor profiles and different things. And the thought process behind that was, if they experienced it in our shop, they'd be more likely to buy it when they go to the grocery store off the shelf. And we saw that start to really work in our benefit. And that was in 2014 that we opened that first satellite location. So our first year of opening, that was Harrisonburg. So that was number 50 in the state. Then we replicated the same model in Richmond, 2015. We opened another location in Richmond, which is a much bigger locale, much larger population than Harrisonburg. And that location was number 131. So in just the 2 years from number 23, to our third location as a company, there were already 131 other competitors that had opened. And the way we were trying to maintain competitive advantage in our industry was by opening these satellite locations and continuing to manage our distribution. Am I making sense so far for all you guys? Quick nod. Yeah. Okay. So now the industry is starting to mature a little bit in Virginia. And by mature, I mean much similar to what, honestly, California has, Colorado has. Many more locations on the street corner in most of the populated areas throughout the state. You could expect with reasonable certainty that you would be able to find somebody making a craft product somewhere pretty close by. And that just means more and more competition. And also what it meant was, all of y'all who are sitting in the room right now can't really experience what we do, because all we did was sell beer, right? So you're underage, you can't experience it. We're really limiting the people that we're targeting. The tasting room model very much went like this and then went like that in the state of Virginia, because there's only so many people with enough disposable income and a spouse who may or may not like beer that's okay with them driving around the state and continuing to try different breweries before it becomes hey, like we'd like to do this as a family and there's nothing for the kids to do, or I'm tired of you going out and just going to breweries. I don't like beer and I'm not joining you. So we knew we needed to embrace what the mature market looked like. And for us, that was step back into a full service, something for everyone type model. So in 2017, we opened what is our flagship location here in Charlottesville. This is a 7,500 square foot restaurant location with a 15,000 square foot production facility and a very large outdoor space right in the heart of downtown, full service restaurant. So we now have everything here. We do craft sodas. We have an excellent executive chef who opened this location with us. And we really came out swinging with a big events program. We do a ton of birthday parties. We do everything from, I mean, we like to say we do everything before birth till after death. We have baby showers here and we have celebrations of life here and we have absolutely everything in between. And what has made this so important for us is it's really expanded our community reach in Charlottesville. We can touch everybody now. You don't have to just drink beer. You don't have to drink alcohol at all. You can come in here, have a great meal. You can try one of our craft, soda products. And that allowed us to start reaching into the community and grabbing new members of the Three Notched fan club. We could pull in an older generation, a non-beer drinking generation, a younger generation. And that was important for us from a brand building perspective. In 2018, we replicated a similar thing in Roanoke. So that's our fourth location now. So 18, we went downtown, took over an old, really beat up, gross downtown restaurant that if you were in the basement, you would have sworn that at some point in the past, somebody didn't make it down there. It was very dark and scary and not a great place to be. But we completely gutted that and redid a really cool little small downtown, kind of expect what you would expect from an old town single, half of a double type bi-level restaurant, and turned that into a cool brew pub as well. So reaching into the Roanoke market now, continuing to bolster our distribution. At the same time, in 2018, that distribution company that we started, that I mentioned before, that was building value, was starting to reach a point where we couldn't fund it anymore. We were too far outside of our home market. It's a lot of money to put somebody in a truck and have them drive 2 hours down the road just to put a case of beer on the shelf in the grocery store. And we were getting to a point where we just couldn't afford that business anymore, but it was a big one and it was growing. So we were able to transact and sell the rights to that distribution company to one of those big four that I mentioned before. They actually brought cash to the table and paid us for the right to sell the Three Notch product. And we've had a great relationship with them ever since. But what that also did was allow us to invest that capital into growing the rest of the state. So we took our distribution trucks and our people and we moved them about an hour and a half down the road and really opened up Virginia Beach and Northern Virginia in a meaningful way. And those are the two by far most populated areas in our state. And we were able to put a lot of gasoline, and by gasoline, I mean dollars, behind that and get them out into the market and focus on growing that portion of our business in those parts of the state. So we're continuing to grow that. And then, of course, COVID hit. 2020 was tough. We had 4 operating retail locations with a lot of part-time employees. We had everything from, hourly folks running food to salaried individuals at the management level. We were able to fortunately keep every one of our salaried employees. We were able to redeploy them into different functions. We did, I think, cut 88 jobs in one day, which was pretty brutal, having built this business up from what was probably 5 employees the first day to something like 125 or 130 employees leading into COVID. But we were able to keep all of our salaried individuals and then slowly make our way back out of that. Our one saving grace as a business was, as you guys who lived through it know, all the grocery stores remained open because they were, considered essential workers and essential workplaces. And as such, manufacturing operations were allowed to stay open that service those. So our distribution business grew. Now, the margins, as I said in the beginning of this call, are not good, but they're good enough that when you get to a volume and you're selling a lot, they can keep the lights on. So we were able to really lean into the distribution side of our business throughout the state of Virginia and keep things going, keep things afloat throughout that time period. Coming out of COVID, we had the benefit of the unfortunate COVID effects of some of our peers. And we were able to take over a Gordon Biersch location in Virginia Beach as our 5th spot. So that was a previous national brew pub chain that had existed across the country. I think they had a few locations outside of the country as well. They were unfortunately not able to make it through because they didn't have distribution and they had to shut down all of their locations countrywide. And we took over a pretty awesome spot in Virginia Beach Town Center, which is kind of right down in the heart of everything in Virginia Beach, and opened that in 2021. That was number 428 in the state of Virginia, just to kind of put it in perspective for you guys. Also, at the end of 2021, all of the distribution that we had grown in the rest of the state, we once again transacted for with another large house that shared the rest of the state. So the way our networks work, it's typically all the same brand families underneath one distribution house, and there'll be 2 of them that run the whole state. So we transacted for the whole rest of the state, and we're able to reinvest that capital again back into the growth of our business. So now we're getting a little bit closer to present day. But in 2022, had the opportunity to go back to one of our original locations in Richmond. I mentioned we opened that one in 2015, take over some adjacent space, turn that into a full service restaurant and brew pub operation as well. So at that point, of our 5 locations, 4 were full service. Again, inviting everyone into the doors with no bias based on what they eat or drink, just something for everyone at all of those locations, and continuing to build on that experience and the opportunity to get our brand in front of as many different people as possible. And then leading into the last year or 2, we really made the decision as a company that beer is changing. The young demographics are changing. The Zs are much more health conscious, which is great. I hope you guys continue that trend as you're getting into college and you get a little bit older. They're moving away from some of what we saw in the boomers and the Generation X, and the drinking patterns are different. They're much more focused on a high quality, flavor forward beverage, but not necessarily one with alcohol. And there's also a different focus away from beer in the spirits world. And we took all of that stuff as a company and really sat down and looked at what we wanted the future to be. And as part of that, we've launched a couple new lines. So we started a beverage company called the Uncool Beverage Company, which is all non-alcoholic beer-based products. And it is focused solely on the, I'll call it younger generation that is more health conscious. And it's the slogan on the can is hold it in your hand and act normal. That kind of stuff, but really sort of tongue in cheek and a playful approach to being responsible and out. And that's been a big focus of ours. We'll have a huge push on that here in January for Dry January across the state of Virginia. And we're looking to launch that one in a more regional fashion. Of course, because it acts like a soda or a kombucha, we can sell it across state lines with no issues. You can sell it online. We can ship direct to house. All of those things are a possibility for us as we continue to build upon our direct to consumer platform, which obviously internet based. That's how everybody's shopping these days. And then in addition to that, we were able to also go the complete opposite direction and contract for some really high quality bourbon products. So we've entered the company into a distillery operation, and we have that up and running as well with another first in the state of Virginia. We have independent Virginia-owned, state-owned stores that actually live inside of all of our restaurants, which is something that nobody has ever done in the state of Virginia either. So now when you come in, you get this great holistic restaurant experience, but you can also transact for one of those bottles right inside the walls without really feeling like you're going to a store, a state-owned store. In addition to that, we have opened a 6th location, just opened 2 or 3 months ago. It is a 10-acre property out in Nelson County with big, beautiful views. It's gorgeous right now with all the leaves changing. And it is an opportunity for us to do a little bit of everything. We've got many acres of property that we have devoted to what we call the field of fun. We've got soccer goals back there. We've got mountain cabanas that people can hang out in. We've got fire pits and, you name it, yard games galore, and then a full service restaurant. And just an opportunity for anyone and everyone to come and experience either just a traditional restaurant dining experience or go out back and enjoy some quality family time or friend time and really just, take the opportunity to get to know Three Notch in a totally different way. All of our other locations are very urban based, so this one is very rural. And then last but not least, we've got a letter of intent signed for downtown Arlington, which would be Northern Virginia. And if we complete that towards the end of 2024, then the company as a whole will have 7 locations throughout the state of Virginia, Northern Virginia, 2 in Central, 1 in Richmond, 1 out west, and 1 all the way down in the east, and then another one further south. So we sort of have the entire state of Virginia covered with Three Notch locations, which only bolsters our distribution and name recognition when people are shopping in the stores, going out to restaurants, and just continues to kind of feed the engine, at least we think. And as of yesterday, I took a look when I was preparing for this. We're at 255 employees now. So that's where the company has grown in the last 10 years. And it's a joy to come to every day and spend some time with some really awesome people and, continue to build a business here. So that was 30 minutes, Felicia. I hope that was sufficient, but I think we can open it up for questions if that works.
Yeah, that works. Thank you so much. Those who have questions, can you come up here in the front so he could see you, please? And Alec, you are required to ask a question.
Hi, I'm Braden.
Hey, how are you?
Good. I was wondering, what was the most valuable experience you had when you were a kid or like a young adult that you still use and value in your entrepreneurial endeavors?
Yeah, good question. I mean, so I'll talk about 2. One will be experience based, and the other one will be education based. So I was fortunate enough at a young age, and I certainly didn't know that I was going to be in this industry as a 40-year-old, 42-year-old now, unfortunately, when I was a kid. But I had a lot of experience in the food and beverage industry early on, only because I liked it and I enjoyed having. My parents they did well enough that I didn't have to worry about paying for books and stuff like that in school, but I certainly enjoyed having the extra cash to do what I wanted to with, and, kind of enjoy being a young 20s person. So I always enjoyed working. But early on, getting that management experience for me was huge. I mean, I was running a couple different restaurants between 18 and 22 years of age, where I had regularly had staff members who were double my age or more in some cases, and just sort of understanding how to interact with those individuals and earn their respect and their trust. Most of which came just honestly from rolling up the sleeves and getting in there and working side by side with them and showing them I wasn't afraid to clean the grease trap out or do the dirty work, just as if I was willing to ask them to do it, I'd be willing to do it myself. And that really carried over into my restaurant career early on when I opened the pub here in Charlottesville, and getting that just, I think, confidence to run a full staff and have them be part of the team was the most beneficial part of my experience growing up. It has certainly carried over into this business now. We are far too big for me to run things as a single operator. I mean, I've got teams upon teams and layers of management now, and learning how to navigate through that and make sure that even the person who's making the lowest wage in one of the locations still feels like they have the ability to bubble things up to me if they need to, is a skill set that takes time to develop. And it was one that was gathered over time, and I feel like I have the most value for. And then on an education perspective, as much as I hated sitting behind a desk and doing spreadsheet work, a lot of what we do now is forecasting, and we do a lot of work in profit and loss statements. They're P&Ls for short, if you guys are familiar with what those are. And we need to be accurate in our forecasts, not only to be able to decide when it's time to pull the trigger on adding more staff and folding them into the business to help us grow, but also to be responsible and make sure that we're going to be able to hit our targets. Don't overinflate them, but we certainly don't want to haircut ourselves and always be under, and be realistic about what the expectations of the company should be for the time moving forward. So a lot of that education at Lehigh on the engineering side has come into play.
Yeah. And was that education from like college?
Yeah, I mean, I think just you guys are probably all much more versed on the computer side than my generation was. That straddle one, right? Like I had a Razor cell phone in college. Email became a thing while I was in college. So we didn't have nearly as much access to that growing up, specifically all the Microsoft suite stuff, right? So learning all of that and being forced into Excel, as basic of a tool as that can be, the amount of people that I meet who are just a little bit older than me that don't really know how to use it is, it's a real thing. And that's a barrier when you're trying to understand how to look at numbers in a meaningful way. So yeah, a lot of that came from school. And then now it's every day for us. So, it's kind of like second nature.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Lincoln.
Hey.
So my question was, obviously it's been a journey, building up your company. I want to know what motivated you to keep going this far, even through all the hardships.
Ooh, good question. You know, the most rewarding thing out of this for me is it is not a joke when they tell you when you get older, you spend more time with your work family than you do many times with your real family. And I get motivated by the people that are here. We've been very fortunate to hire some of the best. We don't have a ton of turnover at the management level. And when we have lost somebody, it's just because they've been given an opportunity, quite frankly, that's just too good for them to pass up. And sometimes we try to match it. We usually can't, unfortunately. But I really get motivated by the people that I work with every day. And I think that's what, keeping the lights on for 255 families is a big deal. And it might sound like a bit of a burden, but it's not at all. It's actually what is very motivating for both myself and my business partner. We share that mentality a lot. And then of course, creating a life for myself that I can be proud of, but also get to a point in my life where financially stable, but also have uber amounts of flexibility. I often joke that if I could clone myself, I'd probably be the worst employee. I think I'm an excellent entrepreneur because I will work day in and day out because I'm self-motivated, but I don't know that I would do great if I was being told what to do or had to punch a clock. I'll still outwork most people in terms of hours in the week, but they are very meaningful hours that I put in. And at the same time, if the kids are off because they're not at school for the day, or, we've got a Halloween party at the house tomorrow, I'm not coming into work tomorrow, right? I'm going to stay at home and I'm going to prepare for a Halloween party and have a great time with the family. So I'm heavily motivated for that flexibility of schedule. I love putting in the hard work when I'm here, and then earning the reward to have that flexibility and develop that into my day, my week.
Thank you.
Yep. Also, I know I'm not supposed to talk a ton. It's beer and burgers is basically what we do. That's fun. Like it's supposed to be fun, right? So we've created a business that is enjoyable to be at. There's a lot of jokes here all the time, and we're not performing life or death activities. We're just making sure people are having the best time that they can have when they're with us. So that's an enjoyable environment to be in, usually.
My name is Jaden, and you said that the industry has grown rapidly in Virginia. So how has the increased competition affected your business, and how did you get ahead of rivaling companies that were being successful?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, man, Jaden, we got lucky, if I'm being honest. I mean, the timing of us opening, I neglected to add this. I'm not trying to like tout any awards or anything like that, but we are basically the number one distributed Virginia owned craft brewer in our state. So we are not just a player. We are at the top. We're a top 15 craft brand in Virginia across the board. So that includes New Belgium, all the big boys that you may or may not have heard of. Of course, you guys are younger, but so we have a big business here. But honestly, a lot of it was luck. And we did a lot of things right, but the timing, because of the way that law changed and when we opened and how quickly we got to market, was what allowed us to grab some real market share. And things are going in reverse as craft is turning down across the country. It's down 3% this year, just across the board in the United States. We're up 13%, but craft as a whole is down 3%. But what that does, if you're a grocer, if you're, I don't, do you guys have Kroger's or Harris Teeter's or Food Lions or any of those in California? No. What's the big grocery store in California?
Ralph.
What is it?
Ralph's.
Ralph's? That's a creative name. Ralph must be a genius. No, if you're a Ralph's buyer, right, and you're talking about your aisle, and you have a segment that's declining by 3%, you're probably going to take 3 or 5% away from that, right? So we were fortunate enough to get out of the gate fast and get a lot of shelf placements. Our product performs well, and now we're in a market where we're continuing to grow, but our competitors across the board are shrinking. So there's less space to be had, and we're getting more share of that less space. And a lot of that, again, was timing. There has been not a brewery. There's been one brewery that is younger than us that has caught any type of fire in the last 10 years at all. Otherwise, everyone else is our age or older. And that's just because we all got out of the chute early enough to win those placements. The draft component, the restaurant component, like when you go out to a restaurant and they've got a beer list or whatever, that's forever competitive. That's usually rotational. The buyer, whoever's in that spot as the bar manager at the time, you're kind of beholden to their tastes, but that's not where we make our hay. We sell 80 to 85% of all of our product through the grocery channels where people actually buy it and take it home. So that's where we focus on winning as much as we can. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
You forgot to name Alex's best friend.
Hi, I'm Alex. And my question to you is, how has your experience in the food industry helped you shape the way you run your breweries and your other businesses?
So honestly, when we started the brewery, I was hoping I'd never have to go back into the restaurant industry because I had been in it for so long, and I kind of made my business partner promise me we wouldn't. And then 3 years later, we were right back into having that discussion. But like I said earlier, I think the biggest thing for any entrepreneur, doesn't matter what industry we're talking about, you've got to have a good baseline of experience. I see so many people that get into our industry because they've got a ton of dough. A lot of them have made money in whatever their previous endeavors were, and they just think it's going to be fun. And it is a hard business to get into. And they open up and they have never run a tasting room or been part of a restaurant or seen how a kitchen operates or understand what it's like to manage people who make $12 to $15 an hour. That is a skill set in and of itself, trust me. And making sure that they're motivated to come to work every day and that they're putting their best foot forward, because that all trickles down to the customer experience. All of that stuff is part of what I benefited, by having that experience growing up. So it's hard for me to pinpoint one thing specifically, other than the fact that I can walk into any one of my locations and I know how things should run. And by virtue of that, I can have honest conversations with the people who are working for us, and they know that I'm not just making it up, right? There's an inherent respect that is earned when whatever industry you're in, you've got experience from the ground up, and you don't just come in because you've got a big checkbook and try to open up a business. And I think that's key to being personally satisfied with the work that you're doing, but also having the respect of the individuals that are working for you.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
Hey, I'm Edgar, and my
You
question.
guys have to talk louder so we can hear you.
Hey, I'm Edgar, and my question to you is, do you ever see your business expand to other states on the East Coast? And if not, what are the complications that makes an expansion out of state appeals?
Great question. We talk about this pretty much every other month. So yes, I do think that we would expand. The most logical expansion location for us is North Carolina. North Carolina is a very similar state to Virginia because they are very grocery store heavy. So we know what our model looks like there. If we did it, we would absolutely go and find a location to stand up a large restaurant and brew pub operation similar to what we've done throughout the state of Virginia. That would be important to us. North Carolina has been ahead of the curve of Virginia in the craft space. And because of that, they've got 1,000, operators there that are homegrown and local. And it would be very difficult for us to have any name recognition when we step across the border. So in order to gain that, we would need some retail presence to support the business. We are expanding the non-alcoholic stuff that I spoke about before, the uncooled beverage company, over state lines this coming year, just by virtue of direct to consumer and shipping, but also looking at opening the Raleigh Triangle, which is the Duke, UNC, NC State area, in addition to kind of Philadelphia. And the decisions that would go into that for us would be, can we find the right location to open that brick and mortar? And what type of agreements could we get from the shops in that state? Would they be willing to come to market with a large marketing co-spend to really gain some traction on the product when we take it to market? And what kind of support could we expect from them? So that's a tough puzzle to solve, and potentially a very expensive one, but it is something we looked at. And the reason we haven't done it thus far is I kind of explained our path with distribution. We didn't get full access to market in Virginia really until 2021, when we signed that final agreement to sign away the rest of our distribution rights. We were still selling with 6 or 7 salespeople across the state, and that's it, 5 or 6 trucks. Now we've got the full network behind, and as we still think there's a lot of green space for us to take more share in Virginia, and we'd rather focus on the bullseye, the home market, and really get that so saturated before we consider going a little bit further from home.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Greg, and my question is, what was the determining factor that made you leave medical school to pursue a brewery company?
Excuse me. Sorry, guys. I got something last week and it's still lingering. So I got accepted, but I never went. So I didn't leave medical school technically, but I was not mentally in a good place, if I'm being honest. I know that I would not have been able to do 4 more years of schooling at that time. The whole, my father was a big part of our family, and losing him at 22, 21 really, and then going through that process of finishing pre-med, my heart wouldn't have been in it. And I think I would have really struggled. I was an excellent student up to that point. And I think I just knew that I needed to do something different. And also, he was like, don't ever go into medicine when he was alive. I only made that decision to pivot after he had passed away, because I was having a little bit of a personal crisis of what I wanted to do. So I think, all that stuff combined, I just had enough time to really think about what I wanted to do and where my passions lied. And I don't think I would have been as successful at it. And ultimately this has worked out very well. But I certainly would not have met my wife if he didn't pass away, because I was sticking around because I knew he was sick. I was previously working for Goldman Sachs. I was actually there during 9/11 in New York City. I had job offers on the table all across the country. And the only reason I met Kristen was because of that. And then she was the one who found the location that was for sale here in Charlottesville. And I certainly wouldn't have been looking for a college town if I wasn't dating her. So a lot of the reason that Three Notched exists is not only because I didn't go to medical school, but because of all that stuff that happened in that 2-year period of my life. So it's interesting how, when I look back, how that's shaped, 3 boys, a business, $20 million business with 255 employees, and where we are now today, just being shaped by that is pretty unique to look back at for me. So.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Kenneth. And my question is, how much impact has customer loyalty that resulted from opening your business earlier than competition had on growing your business?
A a little bit anecdotal, right? Loyalty is a tough thing to track. We've tried all the apps and all the loyalty point reward stuff. It kind of works. A lot of people aren't motivated by it. Most people find it annoying at this point. I think everywhere you go, they ask you to sign up for a loyalty program. But I think the short answer is a ton. We have a lot of repeat business, specifically at our restaurant locations, all those events that I mentioned to you. I mean, we have a robust event program here, Richmond, Virginia Beach, and now the new location, a little bit in the Roanoke location, but it's a little small for it. Those repeat events, and they're not just birthday parties, they're corporate events with large businesses that bring in, sometimes they'll rent us out and have 300-400 person parties. All of that plays into the growth in numbers that we see in distribution. It's hard to quantify exactly what it is, but every time somebody leaves one of our locations and has a good experience, you can bet that it's creating a little bit of loyalty. And that's the name of the game. Customer service is number one. There's no app or spend or advertising that you can put in front of somebody that could ever take the place of a good experience. And that's just what we've built the customer, the business on, is about the experience. And that's why we continue to try to offer new things and change the game in the state of Virginia. So tough for me to answer that directly, but hopefully, you get a sense of at least what our values are.
Yeah, thank you. Hi, my name is Jose, and my question is, are there any cases where you thought of pitching into a new industry but didn't?
Getting into a new industry. I've been so head down for the last 10 years. We are essentially getting into new industries. We're in beverage, right? I think after we made the decision to open this place, this has been my focus. Early on, of course, I was looking at different things. I also took the LSATs, which is hilarious. I had no idea what I wanted to do. But no, I think, short of just expanding our offerings, I think the answer to that right now for me is no. I definitely thought about going back and expanding my education and getting into instruction at the university level before I opened Three Notch, when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do, exiting the restaurant, the pub that I had mentioned before we started Three Notch. That was the only other path that I was really heavily considering at that time. I thought it'd be fun to teach an entrepreneurial class. There's some great stuff here with Darden School of Business, as well as University of Virginia. But that would have been the only one that I think I could have taken a different path at.
Thank you.
Yep. I wish I was more exciting for that answer, but
Alex,
is what it is.
ready?
Hi, Uncle Scott.
Hey, buddy, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you for coming. Question. How
You
has,
guys look alike, by the way. You can tell you're related. Yeah. Yeah.
how have you, taking that leap from pre-med to your own restaurant, despite your background in food and beverage, how was that
You know he can see you.
just how did you mitigate risks when you were taking that step and really find an enclave in the market?
Yeah, so your Uncle Gary, when he passed away, left my mother some money via life insurance, as you would all expect. And I went to her and I said, I need some money to do this. And if I don't make it, I'll go get one of these real jobs and I'll pay you back. And that was exactly what I said to your Aunt Pat. Real job is what I put in quotes. Real job was like an engineering job or Goldman Sachs, which, you know, um, in my estimation would have taken me a few years to pay her back. So that was, I think for me, the risk was about my age. I was young enough that honestly, the opening the brewery now was a scarier time for me than abandoning the education and trying the restaurant piece, because I knew that I was close enough to being out of college and I had plenty of offers on the table that if everything went bad, and restaurants go bad fast, right? They either kind of make it or you're out in like a year. That's kind of how the restaurant industry is. So I wasn't so concerned about the risk then because I didn't have any responsibilities. It was just me. I mean, Kristen and I were, in the process of dating and then getting married. But if that went bad, I would have just, reverted back to probably what would have been a very boring career, but I would have had enough money to pay back, my mother who helped finance this thing out of the gate. The jump to the brewery, fast forward, I already had Evan and Tyler, my two oldest. That was a bigger risk. That was scary. That first year and a half was dicey. There were times where I was putting payroll on my credit card, like quite literally funding payroll for the company with my own personal credit card, mountains of debt, by hook or by crook, getting it done. That time period in my life was much scarier. The only mitigation was hard work. Is there a path at the end of the tunnel, and can we see our way through it? And the growth that this company has continued to experience is what always gave me the optimism to continue on. I think if the curve had been different, which I've seen in many of our peers' businesses, then there may have been a point where we would have had to cut and run and try to do something different. But we were fortunate that the decisions we made were good enough to continue to keep things going in the right direction. And thank goodness we were able to get where we were by 2020 when COVID hit, because that could have been a death shot for the company if we weren't as established as we were.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else?
Tell your mom I said hi.
All right.
Anybody else? I have a question. Have you ever thought about opening a location in California? And what is some of the differences in the business market? Because I'm not familiar with brewery, right? For the state of Virginia versus California. I would assume there's more restrictions here in California.
So, are you familiar with Green Flash?
No.
Okay, they're San Diego based. So they opened a second location in Virginia Beach, and it was totally bad timing and a horrible business move. At one point, they were becoming one of the top in the country, and it completely torpedoed their business. But we did look at their San Diego location. I actually contemplated relocating to San Diego for a year or two with the family. This was 2 years ago. It was after COVID. It's just far from home. One of the biggest pieces of advice that we got from an industry professional who we value, who's actually a godfather to one of our investors and a good friend of mine, was you have to own your backyard if you're in the consumer products. If you're in the CPG space, you've got to own your backyard first and then build out from there. And whenever things are going bad, come back to your backyard. And the idea of trying to run a bi-coastal company that is so hyper-focused on local would be daunting. And that's why I said I think our first move would be a lateral, neighboring state before we would consider trying to do something out in California. The only reason we looked at it was because it was a sweetheart deal. I don't know what happened to the property, but they were not in a good way. And there was a lot of assets and stainless steel and, real estate that was up for grabs for what we thought was very affordable. But yeah, anybody who's getting into anything consumer products related, owning your own backyard, great piece of advice. Start there.
So you mentioned earlier that like the younger generation is more like health conscious, and they're not really drinking like the older generation. Do you think that would be a factor for Californians because compared to like people who live in Virginia?
I do. I mean, I think the trend is generational. And honestly, the baby boomers, the big drinkers, that are really loyal drinkers too. That age demographic is, they developed a palate, and whatever they like, they typically stick to it. They're not experimental. That's going away. So we're all being forced to evolve. I think the general consensus is that California as a whole is healthier, is
Right.
ahead of the curve anyway, as compared to East Coast. But also with the younger generation, it's just something we have to consider. And, being mindful of your state of mind and your body is really important, because everybody in your class probably has a cell phone in their pocket. And you're constantly on display or on video. And that's a big part of, growing up. I think now is different than it was when we were kids, or when I was a kid. And so a lot of our focus is on what is the next health conscious choice, and how can that become something that is adopted by the younger generation.
That's interesting. Anybody else? Okay. Well, thank you so much. This was awesome. You guys want to say thank you? Thank you.
You're welcome, guys. Thanks for having me. I hope you have a good rest of your day.
Is there a way you can send me the link of your property and stuff? I think I emailed you just to confirm your website.
Yeah,
So that, if I could show them, that'd be great.
sure.
It's Felicia, it's F Marquez at Heart District in case, but I did send you an email to confirm earlier, so you should have it in your inbox.
Okay. Let me see. I didn't get your email, but I do have your invite. So let me just reply there.
Yeah, just the link to your websites or all your properties or.
Sure.
Oh, Alex said he could give it to me too, but whatever's easier.
Okay. It's just 3notchbrewing.com.
Okay,
I haven't been on. Yeah, there you go. Yeah. I will send it over right now. And yeah.
thank you so
Anything else?
much. Nope, that's it. Thank you.
Awesome.
All
Bye,
right,
Alex.
have a good day.
See ya. See everybody.